Go.
G'day everyone, this is Jackson Millan, the Wealth Mentor, co-founder and CEO of Aureus Financial.
Sam Panetta, COO and co-founder of Aureus Financial.
And welcome to our first Ask Aureus Anything question and answer live event. This is a little bit exciting, first time we've gone live, other than 15 minutes ago when I was shaking away with my shaky hands.
We're new at this.
But we've got a tripod now, so we're doing all right. So we'll give people a few minutes to kind of jump on. This is something that we've, I guess, had a few questions. We get a lot of questions from our clients and from our network. Look, there's always going to be kind of crossroads throughout life in your finances and in business. And it's always good to kind of bounce some ideas off people who are kind of living and breathing it every day. So we wanted to have this forum to have a really kind of non-intrusive, easy way for people to ask the right questions, get some answers, and hopefully give them some direction.
Yeah, we want to add value to the Wealth Mentor community and to the Aureus Financial community. We assume that if our clients are asking us these questions, then there's other people that are asking these questions as well, and they're not getting the right answers. So we're here to give you those right answers.
Yeah, it's one of those things, mate. There's always, I guess, people, particularly when it comes to money, it's taboo to talk about it, right? People don't like to ask for help, and it comes down to the fact that there's only 15% of the population in Australia that actively seeks advice. So I'm sure there's lots of unanswered questions that are out there, and hopefully we're going to answer some of those today. So a bit of housekeeping. We'll be running these events every Wednesday at about 1:30. We figured this would be a good time. People are either going to be on their lunch break or have some time to dial in and watch. So give us some feedback around the timing. We ideally want to make sure that you get the most out of it. So we're happy to kind of adjust and work around our audience and what you guys want. Further to that, this will be the last time that we're going to be doing it on the Facebook page itself. We ideally want to run this as a community-only exercise. So you have to be part of the Wealth Mentor community or part of our VIP client community in order to get access to these live events. So make sure you request to join the Wealth Mentor group. That'll give you access to a lot of educational information, these regular Q&A sessions, and other great content, and really like-minded people like you that want to achieve the same, if not similar things.
And a little bit of legal jargon, so this is general advice only. Do not take this and go away and action it without consulting a professional first.
Yep, so look, if you want to dive into any of these questions in more detail, tailor them to your situation, don't hesitate to reach out to us. I'm more than happy to make some time, sit down and give you some personal advice based on your situation. So,
happy to dig in, mate.
Yep, we're hopefully we've got a few people on board. Oh yeah, and of course, if you're watching this after the live event finishes, look, feel free to continue to post your questions. We'll either answer them in the chat or we will put them on the list for our next week's Q&A. So keep them coming, and we'll do our best to get around to them all. Fantastic.
All right, so we've had a few come through prior to the session today. Jackson, I think this one is best answered by you, mate.
Cool. All right, fantastic. This is one that I've been getting a lot, and it's probably the time of year. There's kind of two times of the year that this happens. It's either the beginning of the year or the beginning of a new financial year as well. So the question is, I've been running my own business for a few years, but I've always wondered if I'm set up the right way for tax. Should I run my business as a sole trader, or should I consider another way, such as a company or something like that? This is a really good question. The thing about the Australian tax system is that we have one of the best tax systems in the world. And look, obviously, you and me alike, we all hate paying taxes, but it's a necessity of life to live in a great country. The thing about the Australian tax system is that there's no such thing as tax avoidance. If you're trying to avoid tax, you're going to go to jail like Crocodile Dundee. It's as simple as that. But you can minimise tax. And ultimately, it's an exercise of deciding whether you want to pay the tax now or whether you want to pay the tax later. And really, tax structures are just a way to give you flexibility around how you go about managing your tax obligations. And it's really about having that flexibility, which can hopefully lead you to optimize the outcome. I always say to my clients that it's always best to be aspirational in your business. If you're telling yourself that you should be continuing to be a sole trader until you get to a certain level, or you're trying to keep your costs down as a startup, and you'll eventually get to a big enough size that you'll be able to justify setting up a company or a trust or something like that, you're already applying a mindset to that situation that you're limiting your growth potential. So an exercise that I like to take my clients through, whether it be as personal planning or business planning, is essentially trying to assume that you are a big multinational company, and think about how would you structure if you wanted to scale to be a multi-million-dollar business. And it's normally easier to set up these structures, obviously not as complex as a multinational company would have, but having the right structures and the right flexibility in place from the get-go to ensure that you have that structure that can grow with you and your business. So to answer your question, I believe that the goals exercise should come first. And it also is about your individual situation. The thing about being a sole trader is that all of the net income that you earn after your costs have been deducted have to go to you 100%. So where you've got potentially your spouse that may not be working or may be on a lower income, you've maybe got adult children, or you may want to continue to reinvest in your business, maybe not this year, but in future years, a company structure may give you more flexibility around distributions and also retaining earnings, which can help you create some tax efficiencies. Lastly, to answer that question, the key consideration is that the more complexity you have in your structures, the more cost that comes with that. So it's important that it is justified. I always say set a target and then grow to that. So if you are going to go and create complex structures like a trust or a company, then you need to set yourself a growth target to justify the costs. There's no point having a company if you're making 30 grand a year. So hopefully that answers your question.
All right, excellent stuff, mate. All right, so
next one's for you, mate.
Straight away into the property questions. Australians love property, all right? They've always loved property. So this question here, why are interest rates increasing for my investment loans? I thought that interest rates haven't moved for some time. Yes, that's true. So to give you guys a little bit of background, the Reserve Bank of Australia hasn't moved the cash rate for a very long time. It's been over a year. They've stayed at 1 point, and a lot of people in the past would probably assume that because the cash rate hasn't moved, that their interest rates really shouldn't go up or down very much. What happened and what's happened over the past couple of years is that the powers that be, the APRA and ASIC of the world, are essentially trying to control investment lending a little bit to keep a bit of a curb on property prices, especially in places like Sydney and Melbourne, where they've just had year-on-year phenomenal growth for multiple years. So one of the ways that they've done this, curb investment lending that is by making it more expensive for the banks to lend out money to investors and to lend out money to borrowers that have interest-only repayments. So majority of investors have interest-only repayments as well. It makes sense in most cases. So we saw rounds and rounds of bank lifting up interest rates on, well, basically any loan that's secured by an investment property or for investment purposes, and any loans that are interest-only. And it slowly crept up. There was 3 or 4 rounds, and it had the desired effect of stopping people from taking out interest-only loans and from taking out too aggressive investment loans. So basically what happened, a lot of people started switching their interest-only repayments back into principal and interest repayments to secure the lower rates. They got their desired result. They curbed the investment lending, they curbed the interest-only lending, and after all the mess, you look at it now and principal and interest repayments are cheaper than interest-only. Loans for homeowners are cheaper than loans for investors, and your short-term fixed rates are cheaper than your variable rates at the moment, and that's after all the dust settled. So yeah, hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it's an interesting landscape, isn't it, Sam? I think there's lots of talk in the media about this kind of property bubble bursting, right? And we've started to see lots of heat come out of the market. So it's good that we're in a country where our government is very responsible. They don't want to see what happens in the US happen here.
Yeah, and I don't think that will happen, mate. It's
a different lending environment, isn't it?
100 factors that are different, and with interest rates being a little bit more expensive than they were 12 or 18 months ago, they're still significantly cheaper than they've ever been in Australian history. So you've got to put it into perspective a little bit.
Yeah, cool. All right, fantastic. Next one here, the goals question. Perfect. All right. So what do you do to track and manage your goals? This is a good one. This is, I guess, the process that I go through personally when it comes to setting goals, and it's, I guess, the framework that we go through with our clients as well. It's something that I wrote a lot about in my book, but really the idea of being able to be successful is about being able to have a clear vision of what it is that you're trying to achieve, and more importantly, the why. Why is it significant to you or significant to your family that you want to achieve certain things in your life, or in your business for that matter? And it's really having that clear vision that gives you the drive and the perseverance to continue to pursue those things that you want. So there's a couple of stages to this. I normally facilitate a process that I ask my clients 3 questions. And the first question is, what is fundamentally important to you? So basically, what are the bare essentials, the basic needs that you need in your life on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis to allow you to feel safe and secure? And once you've been able to list out as many of those as you can, whether it be having a roof over your head, putting food on the table, not having to stress about paying the bills, whatever it may be, you then have to ask yourself, assuming that all of your fundamental needs have been met, so you're living them week to week, month to month, they don't cause you any stress or concern, what then becomes goals, dreams and aspirations for you, or for you and your family for that matter? And the idea of that is that it's very difficult to set aspirational goals if your basic needs are threatened in any way. So by putting yourself in a position where they're safe and secure, then you can really think about, well, what comes next? And it's about getting clear on those things. So for example, if you say, I want to own my own home, it's about saying, okay, well, I want to own my own home at the top of the hill in Beacon Hill to the value of $1.5 million in today's dollars. I want to make sure that it's got 3 bedrooms, a 2-car garage, it's got a alfresco dining area, whatever it is. Get really clear. The more detail you have, the more fuel you have to pursue that goal. If it's ambiguous, it doesn't have any real purpose. It doesn't exist. So go as far as researching the goal so you can paint that picture. And then it's about asking yourself, what is the significance of those goals, dreams and aspirations? So why are they so important? I think that we've all been guilty of going through life and having an ego-driven goal, but we haven't been able to substantiate it. It's been superficial. And that is really a self-assessment question that aims to really validate the importance of what the goal is. So for example, if you say, well, okay, I want to own a Porsche, then if you ask yourself, what's the significance of that? Well, I just like Porsches. It's not really a deep goal. Whereas if you're saying, well, I want to have a home in Beacon Hill for $1.5 million, it's because I want to provide a quality of life to my family and have a place that I can call my own, as an example, which has a lot more significance and purpose. Further to that, once you've got this kind of big picture, it's about prioritizing those goals and then about breaking them down. So I like to break it down into a 90-day action plan. And it's about working out, well, what is it that you want to achieve? What can you do over the next 90 days to set yourself on the right path and I guess review your progress towards these goals? And it essentially breaks that down into an action plan. So you know every single week, every single month, what it is that you need to do in order to keep on track for those goals. One important thing, it's very important to keep your personal goals and your business goals separate. Far too often, business owners put all of their eggs in one basket and everything is about their business. It's about reinvesting in their business, it's about growing their business, it's business this, business that. It is very important that you have an identity and a goals framework outside of your business, because at the end of the day, your business should just be a vehicle for you to achieve the lifestyle that you want. So it's very, very important to have goals for both.
Yeah, and I think this is the probably biggest separating factor in Aureus from the entire financial services industry. It's about diving in to what those goals are instead of, most people, they expect they come to us and they go, oh, where do I invest my money? Sit down, Chachi. That's not what we're about. Why do you want to invest the money? And then you got to work backwards from there. Do you know what I mean? It's the investments and even the money itself, all those things are just vehicles for you to actually achieve whatever your life goals are. So if you're not clear on what it is you're actually doing, no amount of money or investment is really going to get you anywhere, because you're sort of not working towards anything. Does that make sense?
Right. Yep, no, it's a good observation, mate. All right, next one's for you, mate. This is a good one.
Yeah. All right, so it's someone asked, I have recently come across a windfall. How should I invest the money? This actually ties in really good with the last question. So the main thing, it's you need to think about, all right, I've got this cash, I've got this money, I want to invest it. You want to invest it because you want to get ahead, essentially. But you've missed out on 2 steps. So the first step, if you have some money to invest, should be, well, what's the end goal? What do I actually want to achieve from these investments? From there, you can build a strategy to take you from A to B, where your goals are. And then C, the third step, is actually the vehicles that you invest in. So whether it's bonds or stocks or property or cash, it doesn't really matter. That sort of just fits into, that's the scientific part of it, the investment. That just fits into whatever your goals are. You need to work it on the soft bits first of what you're trying to achieve. How do you get there? And then we'll fit the investments into it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we get this question quite a bit, and it normally comes by way of someone getting a windfall from an inheritance. And last year I had a client that received a pretty sizable inheritance, and I guess it's to do with the emotion of the situation. It's generally a close relative, and obviously they're caught up in the emotion. And a lot of the times people make the wrong decision. And what they might think is the right decision, but really through those kind of rose-tinted glasses. And it's really just about, I guess, this particular client wanted to go and buy a holiday home in the South Coast, and have it as a kind of a stays, Airbnb type rental, and then be able to utilise it to spend more time away with their family. And when we spent the time diving into it, doing the maths around crunching the numbers of whether it was a good investment decision, because what they tried to do, and this is a mistake that people make very often, is trying to mix lifestyle decisions with investment decisions to try and get the best of both worlds. And more often than not, it just never works. You should have investments that are vehicles to drive you to your lifestyle goals. And it's all well and good if you want to buy a lifestyle property, a holiday house for you to go take your family, but the primary objective should be the lifestyle goal. And of course, if you are able to Airbnb it or whatever and make some additional cash, then perfect. But the primary intention is for your lifestyle. So through that process, we actually had to split out the lifestyle aspect and put weighting on that, and measure all the pros and cons. How often are you going to go? What's it going to cost you to keep the property up and running? And then from an investment decision, if it is an Airbnb, are you going to go down every week and clean the place? Or are you going to hire somebody to do it? Do you want to have to deal with handovers of keys and all of these other things that come with that responsibility? And ultimately, by going through that exercise and kind of just facilitating that conversation objectively, they ultimately decided not to do it. What they ended up doing with it is chucked it in their offset account, and they got a really good head start on paying off their mortgage, which allowed them to I guess take some pressure off. And actually, some of the money they saved on interest as a result of that, they're able to reinvest that back into doing more family holidays. So in a roundabout way, it helped them achieve their lifestyle goals. Anyway, just without the responsibility of managing a property down the South Coast.
Yeah, we see a lot of people trying to disguise lifestyle decisions as financial decisions, but you can't do it. You have to segregate the two.
Very different. Cool. All right. Have we got any live questions yet? Let's see. Cool. All right. Let's move on to the next one that we had. So I've been in business for a while, and I'm not sure how I should plan for my next phase of growth. So how do I make the time to plan properly? Fantastic. So this is a really good question, and I think it kind of ties in with the common theme. And I think once again, it's the time of year. Everyone's kind of in planning mode. Let's hope too many of you haven't broken New Year's resolutions yet, but goals planning is very, very important, particularly in business. The idea of being able to plan for your next phase of growth is about understanding what it is that you're actually trying to achieve. And I personally start with what I want to achieve as a person outside of my business. So how much income do I want to make? What level of wealth do I want to create for myself in order to achieve my personal goals? What are the lifestyle goals that I want to create in terms of my time or my pursuits, my hobbies, these types of things? And then I work out, okay, well, in order for me to be able to achieve all those things, then what does my business need to do? And obviously Sam and I are fresh in a new business, so we're going through this kind of goals exercise on pretty much a day-to-day basis of just making sure that we're on track. And we're very clear on our next stage of growth and what we need to achieve. And as a result of that, it's about, well, once we achieve that, then we can derive more personal benefit for ourselves. And then once we've been able to work that out, we say, okay, well, what does the business need to do to pay me that amount of money? And then therefore, well, how does my business make that amount of money in profit after all of my costs? So then you can reverse engineer it the whole way back. Once again, purposely, I've tried to create a framework of that 90-day plan that works for personal and also business. We're just trying to make it a little bit more user-friendly, and we'll probably have it ready by next week. So I'll actually put that template on the community for people to work through.
It's a really good template. Look, I think it's important to segregate your goals here. It's so easy for business owners to just get lost in the confusion of it all, and it's a double-edged sword, because business owners essentially have more, what would you call it, more opportunity to take control of their lifestyle planning, their lifestyle goals, more so than employees. They're more in charge of the day-to-day, how much business they bring in, how much revenue, but they've also got a lot more responsibilities. So with that being the case, a lot of them get stuck working in the business, and they never sort of take a step back and look at the overview of the business and go, all right, how do we take it from X to Y to reach my goals?
Yeah, and look, I think the other point here is getting clear on the types of goals that you're trying to achieve in your business. Something that I hear a lot is business owners talking about growing their revenue. And revenue doesn't mean a thing. Ultimately, you should be looking at either increasing your EBIT numbers or your net profit figures in your business, because that's the real money that's left over at the end of the day. Like, for example, we were recently talking to a client who, I guess, didn't have a clear understanding of the relationship between their revenue and their cost to serve. And what actually happened is the more they drove their revenue, actually, the more it was actually costing them from an expense perspective, given that they didn't really understand that relationship, and they're actually sending themselves further into the hole. So I believe that with planning, you need to know where you are, you need to know where you want to go, so then you can address the gap. So make sure you've got the right tools in your business to understand your numbers and how you're performing. Personally, we use Xero as our accounting system, like most small businesses do. But the reporting in Xero isn't the best. Its tool is really to be a bookkeeping and accounting tool, not a KPI or a numbers analysis tool. So we personally use Fathom HQ, which is an add-on to Xero. It allows you to extrapolate your data from Xero and really give you a complete financial and KPI dashboard so you can make better business decisions. The other good thing about it is that for a lot of people, they're intimidated by the numbers in their business. Like, what the hell's EBIT? What's my break-even point? What's all of these other things, like my asset ratio and my liquid ratio and all these other things in business where you have to be a CFO to understand it. Fathom gives you definitions for all these things and explanations of what it all means. So it allows you to educate yourself around the numbers in your business. You can set up the tool pretty quickly, pretty easily. The caveat to that is that your numbers are right in Xero, so make sure you've got a good bookkeeper and a good accountant, and make the time to understand your numbers and learn what it means to be a real business owner, a real entrepreneur, and that will help you plan more effectively.
Oh, mate, I think that's so important. I know most of the people that are in business aren't in financial services, right? So they're not there. That's crunching the numbers is not their forte, right? Jackson and I are really good at it, right? We understand it. So in our business, we can crunch the numbers, and we do often, a couple of times a week. But we still meet with our accountants every couple of weeks. We still meet with our bookkeepers every couple of weeks for someone else to have a look over their numbers, and that's coming from two people who do understand the numbers.
Yeah.
If you're running a business and you don't understand all the numbers, you need to get someone on your team who understands it, who can help you guys out. It's so important. It's no longer about just being a marketing person or being a plumber or anything like that. Once you open a business, you're a business person first and a technician second. So you take that on board.
Yeah, I was having a conversation on Facebook the other day with a guy who's recently gone into business full time. And we were talking about, I guess, how you learn and I guess how you kind of develop as a business owner. And a mantra that I always have lived by is that you stick to what you know and you outsource everything else. And he questioned that. He goes, well, if you do that, you'll never learn. And I said, yeah, you're right. But the idea of outsourcing everything else is that you outsource it to an expert who it's going to cost you money, but it's going to save you having to learn the hard way. And don't just pass it to them and just say, hey, tell me once it's done. Actually work with that person to understand what it is that they're doing and the reasons why. So that will help you address the knowledge gap that you have. And it may get to a point where you're still not going to take on that responsibility yourself because your time is probably better spent elsewhere in your business, but at least you have an understanding of what role that person is fulfilling, and you can hold them accountable to making sure that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, no, good advice.
Cool.
All right, where to next? All right, it's another lending question. I think I will head this one up.
Cool.
Like they said, I am hearing a lot about the pros and cons of having a P&I loan or an IO loan. How do I choose the right option for me? All right, so P&I is principal and interest. IO is interest only. So to explain the difference between the two, when you have a principal and interest loan, every month when you make your repayment, you're paying back the amount of interest that's been charged to you that month, plus a little bit of principal as well. So you're slowly, every single month, you're chipping away and you're paying the loan back. Interest-only lending, on the other hand, means that you aren't paying any of the principal off. You're only paying the interest bill every month. All right, so it's pros and cons. For the principal and interest loans, a couple pros is that you're actually paying the loan off every month. So at the start of the year, and at the end of the year, the loan's going to be significantly smaller. Principal and interest rates are typically a lot cheaper than interest-only interest rates. Cons, your repayments are bigger. So if you're paying the interest bill every month plus some principal as well, then your repayments are going to be larger than if they were interest-only. And looking at the interest-only portion, some of the pros, the repayments are lower. So your cash flow's heaps better. You need to think for, let's say, an investor who's bought an investment property, they've got a 5-year interest only period, they're making the minimum repayments on that mortgage for 5 years, but their rent covers their interest repayments. They're essentially holding that asset for very little costs, right? That's one of the pros. Some of the cons is it's typically more expensive than principal and interest lending. And after say you've got a 5-year interest only period, if you've only paid the interest off after those whole 5 years, then your loan wouldn't have changed. If you took out a $500,000 home loan with a 5-year interest only period, if you haven't put any extra into that home loan, after the end of the 5 years, you're still going to have a $500,000 home loan.
Yeah, there's a big strategy element to it as well, isn't there, Sam? I think that flexibility for the interest only is more so for the investors who are buying an investment property. And I guess one of the key things is that if you are very dedicated in terms of your repayments, the interest only minimises your commitment. And if you put money into, say, an offset account, that it can still be working for you, achieving the same effect of a principal and interest loan, but that money's yours, so you could redraw that and potentially use that as a deposit on the next property, as an example. Yeah,
correct. And that's what I do. So all my loans are interest only. Not that I don't save money every month. You have a surplus every month that you save, and then I put that money into an offset account. You save up to buy the next property. For someone who's got no discipline with saving, that's a pretty bad strategy, because you're not going to save anything, and then after the end of the 5 years, you're going to be still stuck where you are. In saying that, on the flip side, let's say you've got a homeowner, first home buyer who's bought their first home. They've taken out a loan at 80% of the value of the property. They can get a principal and interest loan, get some really, really good rates, And if they're a pretty simple sort of couple, right? So not too much complexity in their finances, they can just concentrate on paying that cheap interest rate and smashing the home loan out. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think it really comes down to the individual, what the individual is trying to achieve, and whatever strategy they're using to achieve their goals.
Yeah, look, the principal interest is a good forced savings that you're chipping away at it, and we always say that for a client to really consider the interest only, they have to be a little bit more sophisticated. They've got to be dedicated and have a proven track history of savings. And we generally say that they have to have the right budgeting structure, so there's no temptation to overspend, because these days it's just too easy to tap and go and money's gone. And also they should have a wealth coach or a strategic advisor supporting them using, say, a piece of software that helps hold them accountable. Because without that kind of forced savings, think about it this way. It's an analogy I like to use. Why is it that so many business owners are behind on their tax bill?
Do you want me to answer it?
Well, yeah.
Because they're not putting the money away that they need to, they're not saving the cash that they eventually need to give to the tax man.
Exactly
they,
right.
They don't understand what's theirs to keep and what needs to go back to Mr. ATO.
So think about it, if the government just turned around tomorrow and said, we're going to increase the tax rate by 10%, as an employee, you'd probably bitch and moan about it, but you just pull up your socks and move on with your life. There's nothing you can do. As a business owner, because you are paying by instalments, and those instalments can sometimes have wide frequency between them, you're probably going to get, for a lot of people, you're probably going to get into more strife with the ATO. So it's a similar way to look at it. Do you want a forced savings where it holds you accountable to making sure you have to have those commitments in regular and ongoing amounts? Or do you want the flexibility in order to execute a particular strategy, whether it be continuing to accumulate investment properties or having cash available? So, yeah.
Perfect.
Cool. All right. Here we go. The SMSF, so a self-managed super fund. So should I set up a self-managed superannuation fund? What is involved in the process? This is a very complex question, probably something that I can't answer fully in this kind of live session, because there's lots of pros and cons. To set an expectation, whenever I look at taking a client through the kind of discovery process for whether they should set up a self-managed super fund, we normally spend about an hour or two just going through all the pros and cons. For those of you who don't know what an SMSF is, an SMSF is essentially a DIY superannuation fund. Instead of going through a retail or an industry super fund like your Australian Supers or BTs or MLCs of the world, you have the ability to go and set up your own super fund, and which basically puts you in control for calling the shots. It has a lot of pros. I guess very similar in terms of how you'd weigh up the differences between a principal interest and an interest-only loan. It's about flexibility on one side. If you have a self-managed super fund, it gives you a lot of flexibility. You can buy direct property through the self-managed super fund. If you're a business owner, you can buy your own commercial premises and you can rent it from your own super fund, which helps you save for retirement and maximise your tax. But on the other side, there is a lot of responsibilities. You have a lot of responsibilities as a trustee to ensure that you're making decisions that are really viewing yourself as a member and benefiting you in retirement. So it really requires you to be very objective, have the right strategy, and it does come with a lot of cost as well. It's been flavour of the month for a very long time. There's over 1 million self-managed super funds in Australia now. It's been something that's really been a hot topic, particularly through this property cycle, given that a lot of people have tried to get their money wherever possible into the direct property market. So the first thing to consider, unless you've got a combined super balance for you and your partner of at least 300,000, don't consider it. It is going to cost you in the vicinity of between $3,000 and $7,000 a year to run the fund. It's probably going to cost you about $10,000 to $15,000 up front to get it set up and get the right advice. So you have to have at least 300,000 to make it worthwhile. It's for you to even think about it. And for most of our clients that we look at doing self-managed super funds for, they've got upwards of $500,000.
Yeah, and I think that's not us making that rule up. So when you run the numbers, that's how it works. But even the banks, because you can borrow within a self-managed super fund to buy investment property. A lot of the banks won't even look at you if you don't have $200,000 or $400,000 in your super fund. So it's the entire industry sort of setting that bar. Lending in the super fund, just to give you guys an idea, is probably the most complex finance you will ever get. It's really difficult. There are a lot of rules, there are a lot of hoops to jump through, and it sort of ties in with the entire SMSF landscape of just being complicated, but worth it for certain people. Right? It's not a beginner's strategy, SMSF, I don't feel.
No, most of our clients who set it up are generally in their mid to late 40s or older. They've got their mortgage either paid off or well under control. Kids are getting older or have already flown the coop, and it's really at that stage where they're saying, okay, I'm going to drive my retirement savings as hard as I possibly can, because it can really give you the ability to turbocharge your retirement savings if done the right way. It's at a cost of both time and money. So yeah, for most people, personally, I don't have an SMSF. I don't have the time to run it, and really I don't believe that it's necessary based on my situation right now. Sam?
I don't have an SMSF.
No SMSF for us.
No SMSF.
SMSF, none Neville.
None here.
All right.
Not yet. All right. No, this one's going to ruffle a few feathers. All right, so I'm young and living in Sydney. Will I ever be able to afford a home?
Avocados on toast, or any avocado on toast?
You got to stop eating avocado on toast. No, I'm joking. All right, so look, it's a yes and no question. This comes down to the individual. You know, some people will own a home in Sydney. Some people won't own a home in Sydney. I don't agree with the person saying that they're young and will they ever be able to afford a home in Sydney. I know plenty of people who are from last generation and the generation before that have never managed to own a home in Sydney. So I don't think it's a generational thing. Look, I think if someone really wants to, they will. Can you buy the same house that your parents have? They live in a $2.5 million home. Probably not, mate. Probably start a little bit smaller. Buy a 1-bedroom unit, buy a 2-bedroom unit with your partner when you get married. I've done countless amounts of first home buyers, so yes, it can be done. I bought my first property when I was 18, and I had to bust my chops to do it. I worked more overtime than I care to remember, and I barely saw my friends, barely saw my family, but I did do it. And I've seen other people who have managed to do it themselves as well. Look, there's other ways of getting around it. You know, we see a lot of people that they sort of get a little bit of a hand up. Maybe they get a little bit of a gift.
A family guarantee.
Or a family guarantee. That's the big thing. That's what I was going to go into next. Everyone's sort of heard of it. It's sort of when your parents own property and they guarantee your deposit so you can go out and buy property. I won't go too deep into it now. Shoot me through an email or something like that if you want to have a chat about it. It essentially means that, let's say that you want to buy a $800,000 property. Instead of having to come up with a circa $200,000 deposit for 20% plus stamp duty, your parents can guarantee that, first 200 grand, you borrow the other 600,000 and you get yourself into the property that way. That way you stop paying rent and you get yourself into the property market. But the caveat to that is you need someone in your family who owns a home and who is willing to guarantee you. So that's not everybody is that lucky. The other thing that we see a lot of people doing are buying an investment property before they're buying their home. So let's say you're renting where you want to live, or you're living at home with your parents, or you're living in a flat somewhere and you're paying cheap rent. And instead of, you've saved some money, right? Let's say you've saved somewhere between 50 and 100 grand and you want to buy a property, but that's sort of not enough to get you into a $1 million unit somewhere on the Northern Beaches. So you start to look interstate, right? We've had a lot of clients who have bought in regional New South Wales, or they've gone into state cities, Adelaide, Brisbane. There's plenty of them out there. If you're going to do that, get some professional advice on the property. So don't wing it. Don't get spruiked into some crappy property by someone in a shiny suit. Do your research, engage someone that you really trust, and continue renting where you want to live, but you still need to get your money working for you. So that's some of the things that we see other people doing.
Yeah, it's a good observation, mate. I think the property market in Australia is cyclical. It goes through periods of growth and then through periods of stagnation, and not every city goes at the same time. But we find that particularly when Sydney and Melbourne have gone through this growth cycle, the spruikers come out of the woodworks and prey on the naive and the people that are really caught up in that kind of fear of missing out. And we've seen a lot of clients make really poor decisions because they've been spooked by these property developers that have just sold them rubbish. It's important that when you get advice objectively. Work out whoever's advising you, where they're getting paid from. If a so-called property advisor is getting paid a commission from a developer, then they're not working for you, they're working for the developer. So you need to be mindful of that. And it's also important, bide your time. Like it's a saying that I say a lot is people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10. This is not a race, this is a marathon. You don't need to buy a property every single year for the next 30 years. If you buy a property every 5 years or every 10 years, you're doing fantastic. Compounding will work its magic. The hardest part of getting into the property market is that first step onto the ladder. And the worst thing you can do after putting in all that hard work to either save the money for yourself or convince your family that they should back you in a family guarantee is to go and buy a crappy property in an area where your tenants are going to trash the place, it's going to be vacant for 6 months of the year, hasn't had growth since the 1700s, and it's the tin roof is rusting off, and you can go on and go on. Property is about buying quality over quantity. So make sure you get the right advice.
Yeah, look, long-winded answer. You're young, you live in Sydney, can you afford a property? Look, it's possible, but you have to do it. Cool. You have to do it. All right.
All right.
This one's
the dirty B word.
This one's all over you, mate.
All right. So how can I get out of having to do a budget? I hate it. I agree. I hate doing a budget as well. I've really tried to work to overcome the negative connotations of budgeting, because I think that for far too long we've been conditioned to believe that budgeting is meant to be a negative thing. Most of us think that to do a budget, you've got to punch out a spreadsheet every week or every month, you've got to count every last dollar, you've got to eat cornflakes for dinner, beans on toast, you've got to shop at Aldi, no coffees in the morning, no avo on toast. It's not the case. A motto I've always had is you live for today and you plan for tomorrow. Like, most of us work hard, we make good money, we're doing good things, and if you take all of the joy out of life after all of that sacrifice, you're never going to stick the course. The biggest mistake that I see people make when it comes to budgeting is that they try and run their budget too lean, and what they're doing is they're guaranteeing failure. And like anything, our mind and our mindset is really the determining factor of whether we can stick to a budget or not. And if we're constantly setting ourselves up to fail, how can you condition yourself to be successful when it comes to managing your cash flow? So I always say it's about, you have to do a budget once, all right? You do an Excel spreadsheet once, and we call it the personal profit and loss for you, proprietary limited. And I've written about this in my book. The idea is then defining what it is that you require to live the life that you desire. And as a result of the income that you earn and the lifestyle that you want to live, is there anything left over at the end of the month or at the end of the year? It's at that point you should compare that to your bank account balance. So if you're saying, oh, well, my surplus is $2,000 a month, and you're actually negative $2,000 a month smashing your credit card, then it's obvious that what you think you're spending and what you're actually spending is very, very different. So then it's about doing some damage control. And the first things first is having the right structure in place. A budget is a reflective exercise. It's a lag indicator for something that's already happened or what you think has happened. You need to implement strategies that act as lead indicators that can actually influence the behaviours before they happen. And how you do that is to have the right budgeting structure. It's about segmenting your spending to separate your business expenses, or if you're not a business owner, your fixed expenses from your discretional expenses. So an issue that a lot of business owners have, they don't pay themselves a fixed wage. You should. As simple as that. once you pay yourself a fixed wage, which is your net income after you've calculated your tax and saved for that to avoid getting in trouble with the tax man, that should come into a hub account, which is there basically to provide you with a buffer of money. I normally say in the vicinity of about 10 grand, depending on your household, will depend on how much that is. And then have all of your fixed expenses coming out of there. So rent, mortgage repayments, groceries, bills, all those things. And you have a card for that you label hub or fixed, or whatever terminology you prefer. You then need to have a discretional spending account, which you have one for yourself, one for your partner. And I advocate having your finances combined. And if you've got this structure, it's going to alleviate all of those financial arguments that you're going to have, not just now, but forever, if you can set this up. And it's about agreeing on how much you need for your personal spending on a weekly basis. Your avo and toast, your coffee in the morning, going for a couple of beers with the boys, buying that new pair of shoes, whatever it is, break it down to a weekly amount, regardless of your payment frequency, and set that up to automatically go into your spending account every single week. You have a dedicated card for that labelled spend, and it's at the front of your wallet, because that's the one you're going to smash. And you're also going to have one more account, which is your holidays and your bills account. And you're going to average out how much you need to save for in advance for the things that sneak up on you. The annual holiday. We're not going to chuck it on the credit card anymore. We're going to save for it in advance. Your registration, you're going to break that down monthly so you can save for that in advance. And what we've done is we've just quantified all the possible things that we could spend. Our fixed expenses, our discretional expenses, our bills and holiday spending. So if our hub account is growing every single month, we're saving money. If it's decreasing every single month, we're overspending. So it becomes the line on the ship where we can see the line of where the water is and essentially what's happening with the tides. The tides should always be rising, which means we're saving money. And then it's a matter of committing that savings or paying yourself first and putting it somewhere out of sight, out of mind. Commit yourself to surplus. And don't use consumer debt. Credit cards are not needed. Do away with them. So I've got lots more about that in my book that's coming out in the next couple of weeks. If you want any more info around the structures of budgeting and how to go about it, just let us know. We also believe in using the right software as well. You don't need to do a spreadsheet every single month. It's just not necessary anymore.
Jackson loves budgeting.
I love it. The sexy B word.
Look, it's supposed to be empowering, right? It's not supposed to screw you down. And you're supposed to understand where your money's coming and going, and then feeling confident about your spending decisions. You're not supposed to feel guilty about your financial decisions. So read the book. Jackson's got it all in the book.
It's all in the book.
All right.
It's a question we had yesterday, actually. Just good.
Yeah. All right, I can take this one. I want to buy a new car. Should I lease it or should I buy it outright? Look, there's no right or wrong answer here. This really comes back to what your big strategies, what your big plans are, and how it fits in. So to give you guys an example, let's say you did have the cash to buy the car, but you wanted to keep the cash and you wanted to get finance on the car. I don't mind that as long as whatever you're going to do with the cash earns you a better rate of return of what the finance on the car is going to cost you. If the finance is going to be really expensive, it's going to be 10% or 15%, and you're going to keep that cash in your offset account earning 4%, probably pay cash for the car. If you're a business owner and the car is, you can go buy it in the company name and it's for company purposes and it's going to be really tax effective and depreciation and all the rest of it, then maybe you can finance it there. Look, there's no right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
You need to weigh up just crunch the numbers.
We'll give you an example. We met with a client yesterday that we've been working with for the past couple of years, and they had a property. They wanted to buy an investment property, and Sam helped them get a pre-approval. We helped them basically go through the whole process of basically from start to finish to get the investment property. But they also said to us at the same time, look, we need a new car. We wanted to start a family. It's just something that we need in order to get around. And we said, look, cool your jets, because if you would have gone out and spent that money that we got cash out for you against your existing property, you wouldn't have been able to get the investment property. So let's get the investment property sorted first. But obviously that ate up most of their surplus cash that they had available. So then as a result of that, we then went and we were in the process of setting them up with a lease arrangement, which is going to allow them to still have the new car, but they've now got this significant asset that is working for them, which is going to compound hopefully at a higher rate than what the car repayments are going to cost them. So they're able to get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, correct. And they can afford to take the finance out on the car because, you know, we monitor their budget. We know how much is coming in, how much is going out, and that fits in. They're still going to create a surplus every month, even with the repayments on the car. So for them, it works perfectly.
Cool. All right. This is an interesting one. I think, look, I can answer this to a degree, but I'm going to divert you on to somebody else who knows a bit more about this than I do. So the question is, how are you best to build your brand in your industry? And this is something that we're focusing on a lot at the moment. Obviously, I'm trying to build the Wealth Mentor brand, which is my kind of thought leadership brand. I've written my first book, which is going to be published shortly. We're really trying to get out there to kind of build a brand around our business and through thought leadership. So I think I've gone about this a couple of times because, as most of you may know, I've had previous businesses. My first business was a fashion business, and fashion is all about brand. Like, as soon as you think of brand, the things that normally come to mind for a lot of people are fashion-related brands.
That's true.
And so the branding exercise is very important. And I found that I struggled to build a brand around my fashion label back in the day. And I always struggled to put my finger on it. And I think I've nailed it down now. The reason was, and as I've spoken about a lot about my previous businesses, that I just wasn't passionate about it. It wasn't me. It was always a struggle. It was something I was always pushing because I didn't really want to be in that type of business. It was just a pursuit of money. And it oozed through every part of my business. It was just like, oh shit, I've got to keep doing this. And ultimately, as most of you may know, I wound that business up and donated all my stock to charity and closed it down. So in this business, particularly when we're talking about thought leadership around wealth and finance, it's something that I'm very passionate about. I come from humble beginnings. My parents never had really good advice. They made some financial decisions that led them down the wrong road in many instances. And it's been a big passion of mine, and the reason why I got in this industry in the first place was to try and be the catalyst for change, to help people like them get the right information, the right advice, the right guidance to make the best decisions for them. So I think that building a brand has to be congruent to who you are as a person. You can't fake it. It doesn't work. You might be able to do it for a while, but people will see through the facade. So you have to be honest, and you have to be true to yourself. And I think you have to be a little bit vulnerable as well. You have to be willing to share part of yourself. If you know straight away when you see someone on TV and they've got the full act on and like putting on this persona, and you go, oh, that person's full of shit. So you shouldn't do that. I think building a brand should be organic, and it should be a representation of who you are. I think you've got to ask yourself, are you willing to be this person and represent this brand for the rest of your life? And if you can honestly answer yes to that, then you're on the right path. All this kind of marketing stuff, I would say it's best to kind of just follow thought leaders that are in the industry that inspire you. If you're in business, I'm sure most of you have heard of Gary Vee. He annoys me, but he's good at what he does. Tony Robbins, all of these types of characters. I think that a lot of them are very good representations of their brand. And I think the reason why Gary Vee has been so popular, although because his personality is very polarizing. He's very in your face, hyperactive, over the top, and that's just who he is. So I think people appreciate that. So hopefully that answers your question.
Very good. Very good. You reckon we've got time for one more question before we wrap it up, mate?
Yep.
All right. Oh, I get this one a lot. All right. So the clients come through and they've said, I'm self-employed. Why is it so hard to get the banks to lend me money? Yeah, it's a tricky question to answer. There's a few reasons. And it's not because banks are adverse lending money to people that are self-employed. That's a fallacy. That's not true. We have many clients that are self-employed, and they have very significant amounts of lending with multiple banks. They've built huge property portfolios. They have lending in their business. They've got heaps of business finance. So It's not that it's hard to get the banks to lend you money, but the rules are a little bit trickier. I guess the big thing, well, let's compare it. Let's compare it to someone who's PAYG. There's a handful of banks out there that if you go and you get a new job and you get one pay slip, the banks will base their borrowing capacity on that one pay slip, and off you go, you'll get the loan. On the flip side, when you're self-employed, typically banks want to see 2 years full financials before they work out how much you're actually earning, and will lend you money based on that. You got to think, guys, when you're in business, and anyone who's in business will understand this, it's not the money doesn't come in, the revenue doesn't come in every single month like your pay slip does, right? It's lumpy, it goes up and down, your expenses fluctuate. So to get a really good, and you're growing as well, all right? So, business in January, they can be making a lot more in December than they were making in January. So you need to step back and the banks need to take a longer term view of how the business is performing and how it's growing over a period of a couple of years. Some banks will use 1 year's financials, very few, but there are a couple. Some will do low docs, but they don't really exist much in Australia, and they're really expensive, and they've got a lot of rules around them, so most people steer away from low doc loans. Some banks are even more stricter. They want to see 3 years, they want explanations, letters from accountants, things like that, but they're rare as well. I think a common problem that I see with business owners and why they struggle to get the amount of finance that they want is because they earn X amount of revenue and they're really good at making money, right? So they're really good at earning revenue, but they put every single expense on the world through the business because they don't want to pay the tax man nothing. So by the end of the year, the business has hardly made a profit because the owners of the business just pump all the expenses through and look, they succeeded in their goal, they're going to pay bugger all tax. But the bank looks at them, picks them up and goes, well, mate, you've got a big mortgage, you've got 4 kids and a wife, and your business makes 20 grand a year, we're not going to lend you any more money. And you look at that from the bank's perspective, they think that the business turns over a lot of money, but you don't really put anything in your pocket. So that is probably the one single biggest factor that limits self-employed or business owners in their borrowing capacity. We're aiming to change that, actually. That's where we're doing a lot of accounting work, because for businesses to grow, spend the money on the tax, earn the money, earn the big profits, pay the tax man, and then go borrow money, buy property, and grow your wealth that way. So there's more than one way to go about it. The other big thing, and it's something that's becoming more and more relevant, is lining yourself up with business bankers. So any good finance guy will have connections with all the business banking units in the big banks of Australia, and they should be able to match you up with a business banker who's not only going to help you grow your business, they're going to help you understand your business, and they're going to be a little bit more lenient when it comes time to lending and the sort of rules they can apply. So this is something that your typical mortgage broker, they're not going to tell you about, because they essentially lose a little bit of control over the client. But if you've got a really good relationship and you understand someone intimately, you can get, there's a few other avenues to go down. So don't throw your hat in the ring if you're self-employed and just suggest that the banks are never going to lend you money, because it's not true.
Yeah, I think your first point was the most important one, mate. And it actually goes back to the first question around the structures. You either pay the tax now or you pay the tax later. And I prefer to pay the tax now, and I'm thankful every time I get a tax bill, and I hope I have to pay more money to the tax man every single time, because it means I'm making money. And it also means that I can borrow more, which allows me to continue to build my wealth through property and essentially continue to build an empire behind me. So then when I get to my later years, I can optimize my tax when I no longer need to use borrowed money in order to build my wealth. So you need to look at it objectively across everything. If you're minimizing your tax, you're likely minimizing your opportunities that you have to continue to scale your wealth as well.
Comes back to having a plan. You need a strategy, you need an end goal.
Yep.
All right.
Cool. All right. Well, that was some good questions. Look, by all means, any of you guys that are watching this, once we go offline, feel free to send your questions through either by email or post it on the video. We'll either respond to you in the chat or get them on a list for next Wednesday for Ask Aureus Anything. Hopefully it's been valuable, and we'll catch you next week.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
See ya.